All right, so welcome everybody. My name is Tuex, and I've been flying a jump freighter for about a year now. I've done probably 100 or so jumps into high sec into a MAR, so big trading hub. That's a little bit sketchy for newer players. Been pretty well experienced with this. I will make the caveat of I have not been ganked in my jump freighter. I've been ganked in my DST, so I have some experience with that. And I have been lucky enough to not have a live drill of being Sino bumped or fax bumped, although they have tried to fax bump me before. So coming from that experience is kind of where I'm at. So jump freighters in general, capital class hauling platform. They're equipped with a jump drive, allowing you to jump to industrial sinos, regular sinos, and even though they can jump to a beacon, don't ever do that because we will get that lost mail and pass it around and laugh at you. Also, question: how do people gain trust? So go ahead and ask questions in Fleet and in Twitch chat, and I'll probably stop at a couple intervals and go back and look at them. I might not get to them right away, but some of this will kind of be addressed during the talk. So on stream right now, I have the Anstar up. So I guess in general, hauling alts. You can put your jump freighter on your main. Quite a few people do. But when you do that, you're kind of restricting yourself through war decks on where you can take it. A jump freighter is a very blingy kill. There's basically no way that you can defend it, especially with a war deck. They can just scram you, hold you there, and then whittle away at you endlessly. So you really want to look at getting this on a separate character, preferably a separate account. Realistically, you need 2 accounts to fly jump freighters. You need the jump freighter pilot itself, and you need a Sino alt. You can do it with just one and have people light Sinos for you, but it gets very annoying very quickly. You can just do it a lot faster. Typically, I run a couple different accounts at any given time, but on my second account, I will have like my main character, and then my sub character slots are just basic Sino characters that I can park around, which makes moving a lot easier, especially if you're going to high sec systems. If you are in your main account, just jump from station to station. Really recommend just not gating it ever. There's really no reason to not gate it. It's just being a little bit cheap, and the loss of mails can be really bad. You're looking at your base hull of like 8 to 10 billion ISK, so it is quite the investment to get it. But if you fly everything correctly, there's no reason that you should ever lose this thing. Things would have to go really bad in order to lose it. So starting off, I'm going to go through everything going from skills. I'm assuming most people watching this have a basic understanding of the game, how to do everything, kind of join fleets, create fleets. If you're not familiar with that, there's some Fleet 101 classes on the Brave Dojo channel. That is going to also be important because you're going to want to make fleets with yourself. Kind of gone are the days where we had fleets up for general use. The jump sign or the Sino changes kind of got rid of those. They're a little bit harder to maintain now. So going through really quick, on the screen we have skills. So the required to pilot, basically just to sit into the ship, you need navigation, warp drive operation, science, jump drive operation, drop drive calibration, spaceship command, advanced spaceship command, racial industrial, and racial freighter. You can do it with jump drive calibration 4, but if having that at 5 is going to open up so much more space. At max skills, you can jump 10 AU, which is the longest of anything. It makes it so much easier, so much nicer, and so much more convenient. It is really worth training up, biting the bullet, and just going ahead and training that long train up. There's so much free skill points out these days. You can just dump all those into that and be pretty good. I do recommend jump drive calibration up to 5, jump fuel conservation up to 4. If you're getting into some heavy duty, you're making multiple runs a week, you can look at moving that up to 5. Same with racial freighter. You just get better fuel economy pretty much with everything here. The better your fuel use is, that's where all your money is going to be spent. That's where all your margins are going to be made. Evasive maneuvering just makes you warp faster. Mechanics, shield management, and hull upgrades just gives you a little bit of extra buffer on your tank, which is not so important and low in null security when you're just jumping from station to station. But on the sketchy gating in high sec, it will save you if things start going bad. So after that, just in general, just a quick reminder of the Magic 14. If you've never heard of the Magic 14, these 14 skills are good for every single ship in the game. They can be trained to 5, and you really can't go wrong. If you're starting a new alt, don't know what to do with it, train these 14 skills. They apply to literally every ship. It's going to help you a lot. So anything that you can get into here is going to help you. Just Google Magic 14 if you need the list a little bit later. It's readily available everywhere. So then the next important part is your Sino alt. So Sino alts, you can get away with quite minimal skilling. A lot of mine I've done on the free skill points or on the events. They help and work pretty well that way. All you need is a racial industrial. Personally, I like the Galente industrials. CPU management to 5 and Sino field theory to 1. If you are lighting it in a industrial, you can get away with a Sino field theory of 1. It just uses more liquid ozone. But if you're in a larger tier 1 industrial ship, you're really not going to have that much of an issue. It just becomes more of a logistic and cost saving measure. If you want to use the Venture as your Sino ship, you'll want to get Sino field theory up to 4. Without 4, you can't fit the amount of liquid ozone that you need inside of the Venture, and I'll have a fit on that coming up in a couple of minutes. Making sure I don't lose my place on my notes. So really quick, let's go over the different racial jump freighters. So on the test server, everybody is rich. So I conveniently have all of the jump freighters here. You have the Galente Anchor is the most effective hit points, the second biggest cargo hold, the second most fuel consumption, and the second slowest align time. So if you're expecting to travel through high sec on your route, this is probably the least likely to get ganked due to its tank. It's a pretty good all-arounder. You have the Minmatar Nomad. So the Nomad has the quickest align time and speed, the lowest EHP, the smallest cargo hold, but it is the cheapest one to operate. So if you're looking at margins and really making money, this could be a good one. But realistically, align time and speed aren't going to save you too much. Your high sec side is going to probably be relatively minimal, but any little bit does help. Part of your tank in a jump freighter is just being able to not be sitting on a gate waiting for ganks to come. The Caldari Rhea, this one has the largest cargo hold, the slowest align time, the second lowest EHP, consumes the most fuel. But if you want to optimize the amount that you can haul, this is the one. So if you're regularly finding that you have, more than probably 320,000 meters cube that you're trying to haul in, this is a really good one for you. High volume stuff, really nice. And then we have the Arc, probably the prettiest of all of the jump freighters. So this one's kind of like the jack of all trades. The second most EHP, second fastest align time, third biggest cargo hold, and second lowest fuel consumption. All in all, they're all pretty close to the same. You really can't go wrong with any of them. Personally, I did the Ansher. I really like the Galente Industrials leading into it. When I was building my hauling alt, I started with T1 Industrials, moved into Deep Space Transport blockade runners, and then freighters and this. So that's kind of the one that I chose, but mileage may vary. This one, one thing to keep in mind with the Arc is your box, your ship size is a bit bigger, so you have a little bit less wiggle room to play around in with your sino placement. But typically you can get your sino placement pretty good anyway, even on NPC stations, that it really shouldn't be too much of a problem. So that's the overall general rundown of jump freighters. So now I want to go into how do you find a route, how do you find your jumps, what to look for, and then we'll start getting into sinos and sino placement and whatnot. All right, here we go. So now on Twitch, I've opened up Dotlan. So Dotlan is by far the best resource in trying to find where you're going in EVE. If you've never used it, highly, highly recommend taking a look at it. Very useful in general. So what you want to find is you kind of want to figure out where you want to go. So you typically, for us, we start in GE most of the time, or PZMA, and then we want to get out. Our closest trade hub is Amar. JITA is a bit further, and JITA can be a little bit sketchier just through sheer volume. So a lot of people go to Amar. Other people go to our hauling hub over in Mindori. And so being able to read Dotlan is a very good tool to be able to find a good system to jump out to. Typically what you're going to be looking for is you want a low-sec system, because you cannot sino in to high-sec. You can jump out of high-sec, but you cannot jump into high-sec. You can only gate into high-sec. So you want a low-sec system, and you want to have a high-sec exit. And ideally, well, your low-sec system needs to have a station. Personally, I do not rely on player-owned structures in low-sec, especially Brave-owned structures or test-owned structures. You really don't know how long they're going to be there. They're a lot harder to defend. You might not have people defend, so your stuff might just get stuck. It's much better to just be in an NPC station. Yes, you can't tether, but your stuff isn't going to go anywhere, and in some cases, they're located a little bit better. And then ideally your high-sec exit should have a station as well. You want at least one. That way if you need to log off or anything goes wrong, you can just go ahead and dock up into that station and be safe. The more stations you have along your route, you can stop and come back. But ideally, you really don't want to be sitting around anywhere too long. You kind of just want to land where you need to go in your low sec, hightail it out to where you're going to go in your high sec, and then stay there. Don't take your jump freighter out if you can help it. So the jump planner. So if you've ever tried to use the jump planner, it's a little bit frustrating because you need to know your low sec exit. If you don't know your low sec exit, you can't just put a MAR in here. and it won't pop out where you want to go because it doesn't know where to put you. You can figure out the reverse. You can put it in a MAR as your starting waypoint, but you can't put it in as your ending waypoint. So the way to get around that is to use the range function. So the range function lets you put in a system, your ship type. Realistically, as long as you put in an industrial, either jump freighter or Oracle, it'll get you the same distance. Plug in your jump drive calibration level, 5 or 4. Really don't want to go below 4, but 5 is preferable. And then you can narrow it down. How far away do you want it to be? Limit regions if you want. You know, for our purposes, so let's go ahead and start plugging some of this in. If I can do this correctly, it's a little bit difficult with my push-to-talk key. So we want a system with a high-sec connection. And sometimes there's settings in some of these to select has a station as well. So now we have this giant list of stations that are systems that are potentials. So you kind of just want to start looking at the map now and see, okay, how far away is this? Does this have a high-sec exit? Does it have a station? So it's a little bit tedious to do, but being able to do this on your own is going to give you much higher results. There are routes that pretty much everybody uses. You'll probably end up on a major trade route depending on how you're doing. But if you want to jump to a weird system or a different system, this is a really good way of looking at it. Once you join the jump freighter group, go ahead. We have like a Slack channel set up. We'll go ahead and tell you where's our mid, where's our exits, and then kind of how are the locals there. Because some of these low-sec exits, for example, in what we're going to be doing, I'm going to be showing live on the test server. I'm going to be going to a system called AMI. And AMI, AMI, is a really nice system because it's only like 3 or 4 jumps away from a MAR. It has a high-sec exit. It has good stations. Unfortunately, as of about 6 months ago, the locals that have now taken it over consider themselves elite low-sec PvPers and like to gate camp in supers. So not really a good system anymore. And you really don't know that unless you start checking into Zkill and just spending time in those systems. So once you have your list, you kind of want to go around to your map and just start counting away from where your system is. Once you find a system that looks good, and we'll go ahead and use AMI for our purposes here. If you can't find it, you can either search, or up in the top of .land, you can just type in the system. And it'll pop up and show you. So this one isn't in the same system, but as you can see here, we have a MAR. So we have AMI, Amadin, Mora, Amadin, Leva, Corazor, and then a MAR. So nice grouping. Everybody has stations. It's really close. I really wish I could use this system again, but I just don't feel comfortable doing it, which is why I don't mind burning it on a class. So once you figure that out, one thing that you want to do is then go ahead and make sure that it's still in range. So you have your jump planner, your range planner, but more importantly, you want to make sure that every step of your jump, you can jump back out to your sino. Your survivability in a jump freighter is your emergency out sino. You should always have a low-sec sino either lit or undocked, ready to be lit. If you go through a gate in high-sec, you see a couple catalysts sitting on the gate, you see a tornado, you see some people like in code, you know that they're going to come after you. You want to basically decloak and immediately jump out. And if you don't have that out Sino ready, there's a potential that they can suicide scram you, hold you there while their fleet comes in. Now, depending on where you are, they might not be able to form fast enough. They might start bumping you. If they start bumping you, you just jump out, because the only way that they can keep you there is a scram. But once again, if your Sino isn't ready, you're dead. So you want to make sure every single system that you jump through can jump back out. There are a couple cases where you go through a regional gate, and it's going to be, it looks like it's close because the number of jumps that you have, but it might be like 10.1 AU away. And if you're in that system and you don't have a Sino, then you're in bad news. So the next thing that you want to do is you just want to check on Zkill. So when you go into Zkill, you can search for a system in general, and then just start scrolling through the past couple pages of kills and losses in that system, and it'll give you a pretty good idea of what's going on. If you see any jump freighter kills, you can see what's on the jump freighter kill. Is somebody dropping supers and alphaing off a jump freighter for fun? Are people gate camping in carriers? Are people just being annoying and harassing Sinos? Sometimes all you see is the Sino kills. You can jump in to a system, but if your Sino, and then after your Sino dies, you just dock back up, and then you can undock it and kind of just wait around or wait for them to just get bored, go off, do something else, and come back. So check through Zkill, see how active it is, and then the more you spend time in those systems, you'll get an idea of the locals there, and who you're dealing with. I guess at this point, are there any general questions that anybody has, or anything about finding systems?
I just want to mention, sorry, have you gone over choosing a midpoint?
Oh, no, I have not done that yet. So the midpoint, you can just go to the jump planner. So once you find your low sec, so for us, we're going to use AMI. So once we have that plugged in, typically you really don't need to select a preferred station system. You want to make sure that there is a place that you can dock in. If you're going through multiple low sec jumps, you do want to prefer station systems. Don't worry too much about avoiding incursions. Incursions come and go. They can be frustrating, but for the most part, you don't have to worry too much about them. And then once you have that plugged in, you press go. And this is not right.
I think it's because you preferred stations.
Oh, yep, you're right. You're right, there it is. So the default ones that it's going to give you are weird. I can go ahead and OPSEC this and tell you we do not go to Providence or Tashmerkan in our normal jumping around. So this is kind of where you want to play with. Once you get into the group, or ask around some experienced pilots, they'll be able to point you in the right direction of kind of what systems are used. You can go ahead, you can add additional systems in here as waypoints, or you can, in here, there should be an option where you can select other routes. There's an option in here somewhere, I just don't see it.
It's the bluish line thing beside the house.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, so search for alternative systems. Give you a list of other systems that you can use. It is pretty much gonna, I think it always tries to kind of jump you out pretty far, or preserve total fuel. But this just gives you a good idea of where to start looking for, kind of narrow it down, go from there. Yeah, we don't use these systems, but it'll give you an idea. And then once you figure out like your out system, so my out system in catch, will, once I plug that in, it'll adjust my next jump. I also prefer, if I can, my jumps, I like where if I'm jumping into a low sec system, I also have another high sec exit. If I want to do something, pick up something halfway, it's easier to refuel if I get stuck somewhere. If I run, just getting my Sino back into system if he gets popped, or I forget to bring in additional Sinos, it just makes logistics a little bit easier. You might be spending a little bit more fuel, but you can make it work, especially on our catch stuff. Works pretty well. So that being said, it is time to get into Sino alts and Sino placement. Let me adjust my streaming. All right. So, for a Sino alt, all you realistically need is a T1 industrial, a industrial Sino, and liquid ozone. You can make them really cheap. People like to gank them. It is a free kill. It pads their kill board, and even though it gives them nothing, they will come and they will kill you because you're sitting there defenseless and can't do anything. There are fits. If you you can look up any of Dunk's Sino alts, so like Zinkel, and he has a good fit for a passive fit shield nearest. If you're going in nullsec, if you're in GE, that could be something you consider. You can passively tank quite a bit of DPS, and somebody can come save you. But I found using them in low sec, 9 out of 10 times, they're going to be able to kill you before you can redock. I think there's only been one situation where I outweighted them, and that's because they were in a prospect and just plinking away. But otherwise, you're just going to be losing about 10 mil each time you light your Sino. Think of Sinos as disposable. Make sure you have backup Sinos. I like to keep around 5 in a system at any one time. You have a jump freighter, fill it up. You know, even if, excuse me, on your first route, if you're going to be taking T1 industrials, they are quite hefty. Just fill up your lows or fill up your mids, and make sure you always have stuff there. It's also a good idea to stage some extra fuel in your systems that you're jumping to. Sometimes, you know, you might get out to GE, make a trip up to PZMA, get back to GE, not realize it, that you don't have enough fuel. You get to your low sec, you land in your low sec, and you're like, oh, well, I don't actually have enough fuel to emergency jump back out. And that would be quite unfortunate of a situation to be in. So if you stage some fuel around, really nice, just as a kind of safety backup. Make sure you have enough liquid ozone as well. And especially out in the nullsec areas, definitely never want to run out there, because it can be a complete and utter pain taking a T1 industrial 20 jumps into nullsec to try and stage it. Or just ask a friend. So the fit that I have on screen, this is the good old trusty Venture fit. Very cheap. It's quite fast, so you can maneuver around if you need to. I like it on like Keepstar grids and stuff where I need to get away from the undock. The T1 industrials can be a little bit slow and take a while to get to where you need to be to light your Sinos. But for this fit, you want a industrial Sino in the high, an expanded cargo hold 2 in the bottom and the low, and then just 3 small cargo hold optimizations is enough. The level 1 is fine. With 3 of them you can get there. You might be able to play with a level 2, but it is going to increase the cost of your fit. And then I do like to just fit a little micro warp drive on it. That way I can maneuver around. If you're moving between systems, just different stuff, it just makes quality of life a little bit better. But with Sino 4, you need 240 units of liquid ozone. So that's the magic number that you're getting to. Yeah, so 240 is probably about 98 meters cubed is what you're aiming for on your cargo, available cargo space. So once you have that, if you're in low sec, I would go ahead and just insure your Sino. It's just free money. They will die. You will lose them. People will come and kill them. Null sec, depending on where you are, if you're in a quiet system, you really don't have to worry too much about it. So, Sino tactics. So the Sino locks you in place for 10 minutes. You can target other people. You can fight back to other people if they fight you. Some of the passive fit nearest fits. Oh, let's make sure this loads. Have some drones in them. You know, Falcon fits for PvP or for fleet drops. They have a lot of shield on them, and they have rockets. So you can do stuff while you're there. You just can't move. You can't log off. Or you can log off. Your ship just stays in space until it's done, and then it'll warp you off. But for the most part, you're just going to sit there and stare at it for 10 minutes. When you, I have the tactical overlay turned on, which is very, very convenient. I pretty much always fly with this no matter what. If you don't use it, check it out. It's a little bit cluttered to get used to, but it lets you do cool things like this. If you hover over the industrial Sino, you can see the range of the Sino. So what this is indicating is that anywhere in a 5K distance from your Sino is where your ship can land. If your ship lands on the edge of that bubble, and that bubble happens to be on the edge of this lovely space station, and your ship lands inside the space station, you're going to be bumping off. With that being said, I have a nice little video that I recorded earlier of what a bump looks like, which was something that was quite highly requested. Hold on, let me adjust this. All right, sorry, I have this set up. It's a little bit weird. All right, so what I'm doing here is the first time I tried to do it, it didn't work, so I went ahead and tried to gate it. You can see on the bottom right, this is my Sino ship. You can see the red outline here. It is inside of the station to try to get the biggest bump possible. Even if you just clip it, it still can bump you. So this is also something that you want to kind of know how to do. If you were to go through your gate here and see like catalyst or something, all you do is just double click in space, go to your fleet, jump, and you're free. So that's something to practice, just jumping quickly. So here you can see that I bumped. I'm going like 1,000 meters per second. What you want to do is spam that dock button. So if you get the docking permission granted, leave it, because every time you do and try to do it again, it'll reset the timer and you might be out of the jump or out of the docking range. The next thing that you want to do is look for something to warp to. So when you bump, you're going to be bumping in a direction. You might get lucky enough that there is a planet, a station, or something that is in the way of the way that you're bumping. So if docking doesn't work, then you want to try and warp off. You don't want to try and go back because you're moving at like 1,000 meters per second. Your max speed is around 80, 90. it's going to take you a very long time to get back. Being out in space outside of docking range in a jump freighter is a very scary place to be, especially if you're jumping around. You probably are loaded down. You can carry billions and billions of ifs safely, but one bad sino placement and you're in trouble. So you can warp off. If you're on your high sec exit, you could consider jumping through, gating through to high sec if you know the gate is clear, and getting into high sec. You're a little bit more safer there than you are in low sec, and then you just wait out your 1 minute jump timer and jump back if you need to, or dock up there or log off there. You don't want to be sitting anywhere for any extended period of time. But yeah, so that's kind of what a bump looks like. They can be worse than that, but they can be better than that. Just be careful with your sino placement. All right. So in the in-game fleet, I have linked a sino placement guide, and it is a Google Docs guide. I'll put it up. I'll just go ahead. I'll link it in the comments on Slack if you're not in Fleet and can't see it. But it goes through every different station type, NPC station type in EVE. Where is the docking radius? Where is it safe to go through? If you're looking on my screen, you can kind of see the dotted area. The dotted area is typically a good indication of where your docking range is. It can be a little bit deceiving. The Caldari stations are really good. The Minmatar stations are really good for doing this. The Amar stations are not very good. There are a couple of Amar stations that are Kickout Stations. Kickout Stations are ones that as soon as you undock, you cannot redock. You have to come back and redock. You do not want to be in one of those. Unfortunately, a lot of asset safety stations are Kickout Stations. So if you're going to go retrieve asset safety items, be very careful with that. And make sure you have your sino ready to get out of there. And then you also want to be careful with all these things sticking out of the stations. Anything on here you can clip into and it could bump you, and physics can be weird. So kind of what you want to do is just hover over this sino, and then that way you can kind of see where it is. Just looking at different directions and making sure it's not clipping. Not a huge fan of this because it is a little bit close. Like I said earlier with the ARC, it's a little bit bigger. That's the one that I'm currently in. It's a little bit bigger, and you could still clip. So you kind of just want to pilot around a little bit. So let's move out. When you have the tactical overview up, and I think you can do it otherwise, if you hold down Q and click in space, it'll give you different trajectories, which is really easy for moving around, and we're going to use it again in a second once we create a bookmark. So what I did there is just clicked and then clicked out just to move out a little bit and make sure that we're doing pretty good. So at this point, we're pretty well in the clear. So we can stop our ship. And what we're going to do is drop a bookmark here just to make life easy. But we're also going to use this bookmark to make sure that we're still in docking range. You always want this to show at 0 meters away. So we've dropped our bookmark. Now inside, you can land anywhere in that 5,000 meter range. So what you want to do is kind of just get as far away from the station as you can within that 5,000, that 5K bubble, and see if you can still dock. So this is where the tactical overview is really nice. We can do that 5,000 again. So it looks like the furthest away is going to be up in this area somewhere. So we're going to go ahead and just pilot up over to there, and then we're just going to keep an eye on this station and just make sure it doesn't get outside of that range. The last thing you want to do is not check this. I had one when I was first starting in one of my exits, and I thought I was safe. It was an Amar structure, one of the vertical ones, and based on where the sino had to be was kind of off to the side, and if I landed right on the edge, I couldn't dock, and I didn't realize that until I actually brought in my jump freighter one time. Thankfully, nobody was in the system, so nobody saw it, so we were good. So ideally, you want to check a couple different places on this. Just go back to your bookmark, fly out 5,000. Just check a couple places, make sure you're good to go. But for this one, looks like we're pretty well good. Another good point is if you're not sure, you can always kind of get into the middle area of the station, kind of be over top of the station. It's kind of like a bubble around it, but sometimes they're weird. That it's not always just a straight bubble around the station. Check out that sino placement guide and you'll have a pretty good idea. So once you have that ready, that's pretty much all there is to placing a sino. When you're on a player-owned structure, you can just sit on tether, which is really nice. A lot of the player-owned structures are pretty flat, so you just fly like 10K out of the dock, which is one of the nice things about having the micro warp drive, and then just go ahead and let your sino. Do be cognizant of the grid foo. We have had issues in GE as of late on the Keepstar where sometimes the undock you are not on tether. So if you're on a player-owned structure, make sure you're on tether. Typically between the uprights on the Keepstars are a really good space to be, but you'll probably just need to warp off and warp back. If you're in a T1 industrial without a micro warp drive on, one of the things that you can do is just warp off to a different structure and then warp back to your bookmark. You'll be pretty good just to get back in, just to speed things up a little bit. So I guess the last thing to check before you go ahead, well, there's a couple things on the checklist to check. This is pretty much all you need for your sino placement. This is good to go. We're just going to go ahead and leave this here, and then we're going to run through the checklist on our jump freighter, and then we'll be good to move. All right, and actually I'm going to switch up to fancy split screen mode so you can see both. So what we want to check is make sure you have your ship, make sure you have everything in it. I can't tell you how many times I've made it all the way to high sec and I didn't bring the stuff that I was supposed to bring, or I grabbed everything out of my item hanger but I forgot to grab the ships, which is particularly bad if you're stocking your mids for the first time. Don't do that. The next thing that you want to check is make sure you have your fuel, and not just enough fuel to jump out. And you can see with that dot land tool that we had up, it'll tell you the maximum amount of fuel that you'll need to bring. I think GE to Amar normally runs like 80 to 100,000 units of fuel. The jump freighter fuel bay can hold 400,000 units, which is really nice for restocking. If you can just eyeball it and not have to calculate how much you have. So if you have the 12,000 meters cubed here, that's 400,000 units of fuel. Save you some time later. So make sure you have your fuel. So we're going to go ahead and fill this up. If you ever forget what fuel you need, just go ahead and show info on your ship. Go to attributes, and then it is hidden down here at the bottom. And I don't have enough fuel. Another thing to keep in mind with fuel, it will not consume, as far as I'm aware, it will not consume 2 stacks. So you want to come back in here and make sure it's all stacked into one nice neat stack. Same with liquid ozone. If you have 200 units and then 42 units, it won't use both stacks to light it. It'll just say you can't light this. So make sure it's all in one nice big stack. And then it will, on your attributes, you can see I need helium isotopes. And then this will also tell you how much fuel is used per light year, so you can calculate this way. Another cool thing is when you're in a jump drive capable ship, you can open up your map. And this is where the term umbrella comes from. If you ever hear people being under the umbrella, there's your umbrella. So you can open up your map, and if you set your destination, another cool trick, if you don't know, you can type into any chat box, right click, and then change text into a system. For systems, you only need the first 3 letters for it to do a search. So we went ahead and set our system. We're well inside of the range here. This is another good way of seeing if where you're going, if all of your jumps are inside the range. So if we were in Ami and we wanted to go to Amar, which is right next door to here, we could go ahead and set the system and make sure that all of our route is inside of our jump umbrella. That way we know we can get back out to our low sec. So this is a nice way to just check in general as well. So you have your system set up. If you want to jump to a player-owned structure, your jump freighter is typically going to be in a different corporation, different alliance than what your main is. If you're in Brave, I really like having my nullsec sinos just in Brave. That way it isn't a neutral and I can just dock up everywhere, which is really nice. And then this guy, it's not always blue to everybody. For a while, we were neutral with test on our jump freighter. The test side might see us as blue. We saw them as neutral, which made jumping into staging really fun when you jump into a keep start staging and there's a hell sitting on dock and it's neutral. So to jump to player-owned structures, a really cool trick that you can use if you're unsure if you can dock there. You don't want to jump there and then realize that you can't dock and you can't be tethered, because then you're in that situation of sitting there in space. So you can go and you can click on the solar system information, and let's actually do something different. See if it pops up. Yeah, there we go. So you want to look for structures. If you can see it in this list, you can dock there. So any of these items we can dock at. If you're unsure, check here. Yeah, if it's in this list, you can dock there. Just because you can dock there, though, if you're going to a low sec and you're going to a neutral station, doesn't mean as soon as you light your sino that they're going to lock their citadel and then shoot you with their guns. So if you're jumping to a player on Citadel, make sure that you are blue with them, or you know for sure they're just not going to lock you out. Same thing with like courier contract scams and high sec. So now that you know you can jump there, you have your fuel. Next thing you want to make sure is that you have your fit. And I guess this would be a good time to go over fitting for jump freighters. Jump freighter fittings, real easy. You have 3 low slots to play with. Bring up handy dandy notepad. If you are gating in high sec and you don't have anything with you, you can fit inertial stabilizers to get around faster. Getting off of the gate, getting in warp, you can't be killed while you're in warp. You can be killed after warp, you can be killed before warp, but if you're in warp, it's going to be nice. Also, the longest time of a jump freighter is just going to be warping around in high sec. Otherwise, you're just going from station to station. if you're going through high sec and you have items with you, you want to fit bulkheads. I believe the Arc can get away with fitting armor, but I'm not entirely sure how the resist changes play with that. So you want to do bulkheads. It's going to give you the most EHP. And then if you have items, typically I never gate in high sec with expanded cargo holds. It reduces your EHP, makes you a better gank target, and if you need cargo holds, odds are you're going to be a juicy target to begin with, a nice big loot pinata. So this is really good when you're jumping out, jumping around nullsec. Use as few cargo holds as you need. When you're jumping, the other one that you want to use is the prototype jump drive economizer. This is the key to making money on courier contracts. What these do is reduce the amount of fuel consumption for your ship. You fit up 3, you have some diminishing returns. I think it's like 20% reduction in fuel. So this is where you're going to save money. You always want to have these equipped, and you always want to have these with you if you're jumping. And don't leave them. They are relatively big in size. I think they are, yeah, 3,500. So once you have 3 of them, it does take up some space, but it's well worth it. And then typically what I'll do is I will, when I get to Amar, I will fill my low slots with my jump drive economizers, and then as I'm filling up my ship with my out of my item hanger, I will remove them as needed and replace them with expanded cargo holds. That way I have the least amount of cargo holds and the most amount of economizers in there. The prototype ones on the regular servers are probably, I think they're like 800 mil for a complete set, something like that. It is steep. There is a T1 version that is cheaper, but these will pay for themselves, and they will pay for themselves quickly. If you can spring the money for a jump freighter, I really recommend just getting the good version. With inertial stabilizer, reinforced bulkheads, and expanded cargo hold, you can bling those as you see fit. I personally just use the T2 versions. I haven't had any problems with it, but your mileage may vary. So you want to make sure before you jump anywhere that you have your fit. You want to make sure you have your 3 inertial stabilizers, 3 reinforced bulkheads, 3 jump drive economizers, and 3 expanded cargo holds. Yeah, if you get scrammed, you're dead either way, so I don't really bother with warp stabilizers. So now that you have that fit, you know that you're safe. You can go ahead and refill your cyno because you're now out of liquid ozone.
Docking permission requested. Docking request accepted.
If you're jumping into a system that you know to be safe, you're jumping into a nullsec system on tether, there's nobody there, you can go ahead and light your cyno early if you want to. You can also play games because the jump, the red timer on jump freighters is really low. You can make it out from GE to PZMA and back. You can make it almost all the way back on a single cyno. So if you're just jumping out, dropping off stuff, and jumping back, you can save yourself some time if you time it correctly, and just use one cyno. Just have to be careful with your just watching your time. I left my fill. I didn't light the cyno. If you're jumping into a low sec system, and there are people there that you don't trust or neutrals, what you want to do is you can light your cyno, and I'm sure some people might disagree with me. You'll undock your jump freighter, have your cyno ready. As soon as you undock your jump freighter, you light your cyno and you jump. By the time anybody warps to you, you can dock. When you jump, you have a jump invulnerability timer, you're going to have to wait like 4 or 5 seconds, and then you can dock. You can't always dock right away, but you should be pretty good to go. So now that this guy is ready on the bottom right, we need to be in fleet. So just like you can link solar systems, you can link character names. We're going to form a fleet with our alt. This is the safest way to do it. If you are doing this in a standing fleet, you'll want to click on the hamburger menu and set, where is it? You want to exempt from fleet warp, flag exempt from fleet warp. That way, if you're jumping into a standing fleet, there's spies in a standing fleet, they see you land, nobody can warp you off. So we'll go ahead and undock. When you undock, you have your invulnerability timer. If things look sketchy, just control space, dock back up, come back to it later. It's not worth losing your jump freighter. Now, when you're jumping, you can right click on your capacitor and jump. I really recommend not doing this. This causes a lot of anxiety and can be a really bad move. The best way to jump, let's see if it shows us. Yeah, so see here, you can do jump and there's a beacon. And then when we light, are you kidding me? Hold on. This is about to be very poor planning.
Docking permission requested.
I think I uninjected 4, so we need to hop in a different industrial ship. That's awkward. People still listening at an hour into this? All right. There we go. I think I ran into this issue recently as well. I had to inject into it. I was trying to use my Venture, and it just does not play nice. So we can either slow boat our butts up there, or we could just warp off and warp back. While we're talking, we'll just slow boat up there. So you can see here, there's beacons in this list. It does get separated out now, which is nice, and it does tell you if it's a beacon or not. If the Sino goes down, there is a chance that this menu will change, and you can accidentally click on a beacon. If you jump to a beacon in a jump freighter, just assume that you're going to die. And like I said earlier, you're going to die. It's going to be on Z-kill. We're going to pass it around, have a good laugh at you, and say, don't do it. The best way to do it is to jump from your fleet menu. You can either add to watch list or just right click on their name. Let's check on Mr. Slow Guy down here. Yeah, that's probably good. I wouldn't do this in real life. I'd wait all the way. But it might turn into bump training. All right, so now we're gonna jump so we can see that it's here. But otherwise, we just come over to our fleet menu or our watch list, and you can jump to member. This is the safest way. This is the least anxiety way. There have been many times that I've jumped and wondered, oh crap, did I jump to the right place? Because you'll see on the bottom of the screen, once we jump, it says jumping to beacon. So you're jumping to your Sino, but there is a moment of panic when you start doing that and you're like, oh crap. So just like all jump ships, jump capable ships, it uses 75% of your capacitor. You need to have over 75% of your capacitor in order to be able to jump. This prevents you from jumping out immediately after jumping in. If we look up here, our red jump timer is at 1 minute. And then this blue jump timer lies to us and says if we jump again, our red timer will be at 1 hour and 33 minutes. It's, I think, 95% of that. You have to jump quite a few times in order to get any reasonable jump timer. I jump back to back all the time. I think I hit 20 minutes once, but that was going all the way from Amar to PZMA and all the way back to Amar. If you're going through high sec, make sure you do not have a red timer, or the red timer will expire by the time you get through the gate. You do not want to be stuck in there with that. So if we went to try and dock here immediately, it would say it's too soon. And so now we can go ahead and dock.
Docking permission requested. Docking request accepted.
It would have just said you can only dock in like 4 seconds. And now we're safe again. So the best way, just jump from station to station, and you're all good. So if you're going to go to high sec now, what you would want to do is you go ahead and you dock up. You keep an eye on your alt, make sure nobody is coming to your sign to take a look at it. And then you would go ahead and refit to your high sec travel. So stabilizers or bulkheads. If you have stuff, it's going to take longer. Just fit the bulkheads. You'll be glad if you get ganked later. On that note, if people warp to your Sino, people like to kill Sinos. People also like to live in areas and never really change. So typically what I'll do is if somebody warps to my Sino in a combat ship to check me out, I will add them to my contacts, and I will add them as bad standing, so that they're orange. That way they'll be orange in system, and I'll kind of be aware when I look at my local that, oh, these guys are orange, they might come and kill me, I'm not entirely sure. If somebody kills me in my Sino, they get listed as red. Typically, and these are the guys that live in Ami currently, is White Sky. Typically, I will go ahead and add their whole corp as red, or their whole alliance as red, if I see a bunch of them in system. That way I know to be on the lookout. You can still jump into the system if they're red. You'll typically figure out certain characters that will always come and kill you. Some of them won't care. Some of them will only care if they see something. Yeah, just list them as red. That way you'll always see it on your local, on your Cyano character, and be ready to go. So the sketchiest part is for jumping to high sec. You can do it with your Cynos still lit here. If there are red people, just be very careful. If your Cyno gets killed and then you get tackled on a gate, then you're in trouble. If you know you're safe, you can go ahead and start jumping with your Cyno lit. That way it's ready to go as soon as you're done. And you can normally make it back to wherever you're going, or most of the way that you're going. If your Cyno runs out, make sure that you refuel. If you're in a venture, you're going to have to dock up, refuel, and undock. Try and time that with your gate cloak timers. Or if nobody's on gate with you, just go ahead and get into warp. And then just make sure that you're back out here and sitting on your bookmark. Another cool trick that you can do, since you're locked here for 10 minutes, if you're go ahead and decycle your Cyno. And then if you right click set destination and set your autopilot, as soon as your Cyno is up, your character would just automatically dock for you. Depending on your audio set, if you have your audio settings on, it will say that probably about every 30-45 seconds. So make sure those audio settings are turned off if you don't have that open. So that's a nice little trick, and then you can just basically just walk away from this and it'll go back and be safe and sound in system. Now once you're in your low sec, you're ready to head out to high sec. We'll go ahead and set our destination to where we want to go, and we will undock, knowing on the undock that there's nobody here. If you see an industrial Cyno on the undock, you're going to be okay. If you see a Cyno, a regular Cyno, a covert Cyno, or force recon, or some cloaky bullshit, just don't undock. It's not worth it. There is a search on YouTube, Marquee Dragon, Jump Freighter gank attempt or something like that. He undocks from a station. There is a Sino lit. He's like, huh, that's weird. And then he was trying to warp to the gate, and they dropped a super on him and almost alpha him off the field. When you are coming out to navigate, what you want to do is you go to your out gate and you want to align to. You don't want to press warp 2, because if you press warp 2, then you have to stop your ship before you can dock. Aligning to lets you align to everything, get ready to go, and then you'll hit warp at the end. That way if something undocks, something comes in, something warps in, all you have to do is hit dock.
Docking permission requested.
And you're
Docking
safe.
Request accepted.
If you're doing the warp, you have to control space. You'll forget to control space, and then they kill you. So it's all about just avoiding positions where you're potentially going to get ganked. The other thing that they can do is keep an eye on the guest list. One thing that people like to do is when you undock, they will undock a fax behind you, and the fax will bump you out of docking radius. I think they fixed some of that with bumping off of undocks. It's still possible, I think. Just be very careful with it. If you see a fax undock behind you, just dock back up, because they're trying to bump you. It's happened to me once, but they were idiots, so they tried to bump my venture. They had the right character first name, but not the right character second name. So then all you have to do is just align, and then you'll warp, and you're on your merry way. The last thing that I want to talk about real quick as we get wrapping up here, just as important as your fit are going to be your implants. So you have a couple different options for implants. I personally prefer the high grade ascendancy set. This improves warp speed. There is a different set for align time, but people crunch the numbers. Your longest time amount spent is going to be in warp between between gates. And it's not necessarily the warp speed in general. It is the acceleration and deceleration from warp, which is going to save you the most time. So high grade ascendancy set is really good. There is a inherent implant, I think it's Omega, that is like $2 bill. You don't need that one. There is this one, the 618, I think. Yeah, 18% bonus. Or yeah, you can replace that one with the Omega, and it's a hell of a lot cheaper, and I think it's actually better. If not, it's almost the same. And then one last thing, I have never seen it. I've been too scared to try it. It is possible, if there is a capital ship sitting on the gate, that you could land in it. Oh, that's good. Connected me. Oh, nope, we're good. So the wonderful world of Sissy, we can't actually dock. So we'll go ahead and practice for once you get to Amar. What you'll want to do is you will want to warp to an insta-dock. Don't just warp to the station. There's a chance that you'll land outside of docking radius and somebody will pop you. You want to set up an insta-dock. Same kind of thing as the Sino setup, except it's 2,500 meters that you can land within. So basically the same thing. Just make sure that you're not going to bounce off of the station. Then once you're in warp to the station, that same autopilot thing, go ahead and set your destination. Hit autopilot once you start your warp. You can do it as soon as you hit start to your warp, and then as soon as you land, you will dock. That way, if you have trouble loading grid, you disconnect. Just in general, as soon as you land, it'll dock you, save you a whole lot of heartache. And that is it. Does anybody have any questions? Let's see. How much fuel do you usually keep in your fuel bay? I keep my fuel bay full. If I'm jumping, I buy all my fuel in high sec because I regularly go to high sec. So I will fill up at high sec, and that is normally enough to get me out to wherever I'm going and come all the way back. And then also mention that mid-grade Nomad is the align time. But yeah, so I just fill up my fuel bay. I try and keep it full. If I'm going outside of my normal route, I will definitely make sure that I have enough fuel to make my trip. So just put that on your checklist. Just make sure you always have enough fuel. I like to buy it in high sec because it's cheaper. You could also now bring it in and sell it for money. Anything else? Any questions, comments? All right. If that's, oh, go ahead.
I'll just, once his dogs start barking. I prefer using the Nomads for Align because at least my thought process behind it is that you're vulnerable while you're aligning. When you're in warp, you're safe. And usually if I'm hauling, I'm not in a huge rush. So absolutely. I prefer the Nomads for that reason.
It's kind of personal preference. So like my normal route totally. Is a pretty good one. I rarely see people in system with me on my low sec exit to Amar. I'd be surprised if there's more than one other person on gates, so I feel very comfortable jumping through the gates. If I see a large amount of people in local, I'll typically just scope it out, potentially jump out if I need to. Also, when you're going through high sec, make sure you set your route. Check and make sure that there's no Triglavian incursions going on. They like to drop them from time to time. Most of the high sec regular incursions are going to be cleared by the time you're going through them, and you'll be fine anyway. But yeah, so it just depends on your risk tolerance, and if you prefer to be in warp and safe and slower, or if you just want to get in and out and get to your system faster. If you're going through sketchier areas, I would probably stick with the align time too. Oh, there was one from earlier. How do people gank jump freighters, and how can you minimize that risk? Pretty much like any other high sec gank. The only way that you can be ganked in a jump freighter is if they scram you if you have your Sino. You always want to have your emergency Sino up. That is your lifeline. For example, I was just ganked in my DST recently. What happened was I jumped into Niarja, which is probably the worst system to try and squeeze 4 bill in a DST through. But I had made that run too many times and got comfortable. There was a single catalyst sitting on the gate. They scanned me. They passively scanned me going through, so I didn't get the yellow box. Sometimes you'll get a yellow box if they're actively scanning ships. I jumped into system. That system always has a large amount of people. There was only one catalyst on the gate. I went to a line. The catalyst scrammed me, and then 25 of his closest friends warped in on me and killed me in the following 10 seconds. So part of that is set your standings for like code and pirate and stuff like that to red. Keep an eye on flashy people in local. Open up haulers and gank intel channels. And keep an eye on the kill board. If you do it in off-peak times, it's even better. If you feel sketched out at all, just jump out. It's not worth it. Just jump out or dock up somewhere. Come back to it in a couple minutes. If you feel not comfortable, just take your time.
Yeah, if you're going through high sec, there's a tool called Eve Gate Check as well. That'll tell you if there's any, how many kills have been in system along your route.
All right. Well, I don't see any other questions. Yeah, I don't see any other questions in Fleet or in Twitch chat. So if that's it, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this recording, and